Good morning, everyone. Welcome back to another HRG Outbreak Outreach webinar. Over the past 9 weeks, we have met here each Thursday morning sharing industry best practices, and we at HRG hope that you and your teams have found value in these presentations. We will be taking a 2-week break following today's presentation, and we'll be back with more content for you guys in June. Just a couple things before we get started. To make sure that we honor the time we have allotted for this webinar, we will answer any questions that come up in an answer sheet that will be sent out later today with the remainder of the webinar resources, including the slides and webinar recording. As we all know, COVID-19 has forced many of us to change our daily routines, and that includes working from home. This change has resulted in an increase of challenges for managing remote teams. This morning, we have Executive VP of Outpartnering, Jason Coffin, and Executive Director of HIM, Teresa Tate, to share best practices for making the best out of our current working environments. Jason and Teresa, take it away.
Good morning, everyone. This is Teresa Tate, and thank you so much, Taylor, and I appreciate the invite to co-speak with Jason. First and foremost, I did want to do a quick shout out, not only to all of those first responders on the healthcare front lines that are keeping us safe, but also to, those businesses that are so vitally important, those support businesses such as coding and billing that are keeping those organizations running. So that being said, I feel that this topic today is just so timely, and I want to thank Jason for inviting me to speak with him on this. HRG initially started adding remote employees to our organization with our HIM coding division and our audit division as well. And one of the reasons why we did that was so that we could capture amazing talent outside of our local area. And that was about a quarter to a third of our organization at our height. And we have expanded rapidly with COVID, and Jason spearheaded that transition to moving to remote once COVID happened and we needed to comply with the stay-at-home orders. And so we've learned a lot along that process, first starting with the HIM team and then transitioning the rest of our organization to working remotely during this time of pandemic. And so along the way, we've come up with some tips and tricks that we have found, identified some of the challenges. We've taken a second look at our production and how to engage our employees, and then also making sure that as we made those transitions and started integrating remote workers into our workforce, that they have a secure environment and have all the necessary tools to help them be successful. And so I do apologize, I skipped a slide there. I had a little bit of a lag. Some of the challenges that presented themselves when we began managing some of the remote team members were a feeling of isolation without that daily face-to-face, that water cooler time, so to speak. When you get that interaction on a day-to-day basis where you can actually see somebody and have that conversation, you start to feel a little bit detached. Maybe you're connected, but not really attached to the point that you're feeling engaged and part of the team. And missing out on that spontaneous ability to drop by someone's desk with a question, stop by your manager's office with an idea, you start to feel like there's an inaccessibility of your management team. You're feeling less engaged with your fellow team members, a little bit like being out on a tether, just floating out there, part of production. And so we did our best to create some environments that will help with that engagement, and I know Jason will speak to that a little bit further, but on a baseline as far as communication and productivity, we wanted to make sure that we were setting clear expectations, we were actively engaging, ongoing communication, almost to the point of over-communicating sometimes, just to make sure that they have what they need, make sure that if they have challenges or obstacles that we're addressing them, which sometimes means creating new policies to address those situations. And we've used a lot of instant messaging and go-to. We've created a really robust one-on-one process with our team members. We've created huddles around the project. We've even had division huddles to make sure that we are all in alignment with the goal and where we're moving forward to. And we've even deployed some web cameras, making sure that we're starting that process right now, but making sure that we're moving forward with technology so that potentially we could have the Brady Bunch meetings where everybody is on the screen and we can see one another, because I think there's a little bit of a disconnect when you can't see someone's face. and see, are they engaged and are they getting it, especially when you're dealing with training or QA or mentoring, to make sure you can read those cues. But it's also in the voice. So I think sincerity is a big part of our communication as well. Some personal internet limitations has been a challenge in that when we transition to working remotely, we're off from our regular server internet that we have that is very fast, efficient, and robust. And so when you engage with a remote workforce, there are some limitations that we've had to adjust to as far as some internet capability. And so we've defined some policies about downtime and things that we'll go to in just a moment. I think the biggest thing was setting clear expectations and goals. We think that we do that, but when we're engaging with people remotely, when we don't walk by their desk and see how their progress is, it changes that dynamic a little bit. It may not be the same process to get to that same finish line. And so we've tried to engage with our teams to see what's working, what's not working, what ideas do they have, and have that constant evaluation and assessment so that we can be adjusting, tracking our progress, making improvements as we go. But again, going back to that purposeful engagement, making sure that we're connecting, but making it a personal connection. That sincere communication really is key, letting them know how vital they are to the organization, that they are part of the success of the organization. But part of that also is setting those clear expectations. So being clear about the deadlines, was a thing that I found that I was myself lacking. I would set out an expectation, but I didn't give a deadline. And when working remotely, again, you feel a little bit tethered out there. Maybe you have your own process for how you approach your day. So being very clear about what those expectations are. And again, you don't have that ability to drop by and go by someone's desk and say, hey, how's it going with that project? So you have to kind of adjust and do that virtually and have those touch bases using instant messaging, using GoTo, but also remembering that when people work from home, that doesn't mean they're accessible 24/7. One of the challenges that we also were presented with when utilizing workforce that was not local is the time zones. So we have people that were working all the way from Alaska, Hawaii, all the way over to New York and Florida. And so there does present some challenges there. And so there's had to have been some flexibility along those lines, not only with our coding team and recruitment, but also with our management team, our audit team, to make sure that we're accessible and available to them, to help mentor them, to be there, to train, to answer questions. Also, our IT division has had to adjust and accommodate and provide resources so that we can meet those needs even when we're in what we would consider off hours for Pacific time where we're located. We have people on Eastern time that are starting probably 3-4 hours earlier than we do. So those are some of the biggest items so that we've adjusted to. And so we've created some of these key metrics for the work at home environment, performance metrics, communication, and then what happens when you come up with the unexpected. And so we found that we had to create some policies at the time of recruitment, even working with our dedicated IT team to come up with some of those specific metrics needed as far as upload and download speeds, being able to have secure internet, so that they can successfully work from home, but finding that even for myself, speed is key. I notice a drastic difference when working in the office in that robust internet arena versus when I'm working from home and I have some glitches with my connectivity, and that's frustrating, and then that defeats morale a little bit. So even at the stage of recruiting, you're going to want to make sure that you're vetting that internet process. With COVID, we didn't always have that opportunity because people needed to work from home, and it was a medical issue. It was a mandate that we could not be working in the office space. For the coding team, where that was basically an elective, it was an expansion of our division. That was an area when we were recruiting, we were able to verify and say, these are the types of uploads and download speeds that you need, and it must be, you must have a direct link. You cannot be Wi-Fi because we wanted to maintain security, etc. So I think just working with your IT team, working with your compliance department, and making sure that you're meeting those. And then I think Jason will again talk to secure work environment. But excuse me, I felt like I was going to sneeze. I apologize. And again, when we're recruiting, one of the things that we talk about as well is having a workspace that's free from distraction. So basically, they need that home office space. And we even have them send pictures to make sure that it is secure, and then those pictures are with our corporate office, and so that way we can verify at that level that we're meeting the expectations of our clients for security. We've also utilized a lot of instant messaging, Teams, GoToMeetings to make sure that we are creating an environment where we can train. We can shadow them, look at their screen, help them move through workflow processes, even for mentoring and doing our audit processes. So that's been really helpful. We've also created, along with our regular productivity, we've engaged in allowing the employee to be able to do their own tracking of their own productivity with one of our proprietary tools. And I think that helps with their engagement to see on a daily basis. They can tell, am I meeting my metrics, or was there an issue that I needed to report to my manager? So again, communication is key. You're not in the office. You can't tell if there's an issue. So there is a trust factor there that you're being communicated with. But that's part of what we envelop within our scorecard, is about our communication. Are we following the directives and the policies? It's not just about productivity and quality. The clearly identified expectations can be even as basic as setting deadlines for how often and when you need them to respond to emails. Again, when you're tethered out there and you are working on your own and sometimes kind of setting your own workflow, you tend to put yourself in a productivity mode. Of course, it's important in our environment to have high productivity, but also we need to engage and make sure that we're actively looking at our emails, making sure there's no changes to assignments or what have you. So sometimes you have to go back and revisit those basic essentials that we find are pretty common in the office area and arena, but not necessarily are we micromanaging that at the home level. So I think just setting some of those expectations from the get-go about what communication looks like with your organization and what the expectations are is really key, so that from the start they can be successful. The reporting that we have created, and we're still creating, again, we're still engaging and enhancing as we go, but I alluded to the fact that we created an environment where the employee has the ability to monitor their own progress on a daily basis, a weekly basis. It's a historical scorecard that they can look at. And I think that that's really important, because that gives time management responsibility in the hands of the person who's creating that production. So they can see at any given time how they're doing. But we also have one-on-ones with the management team, so that they're getting that feedback from their manager on a monthly basis, which has their productivity and their quality. But it's also a good checks and balances for them as well as the management team to be able to jump off from. So we found that really important. We've also integrated some team huddles. I think it's really important from the onset of a project to, and we've made some mistakes along the way, so this is speaking from experience, that it's really important to set the goals of the project with the team and go over what those goals are, what the deadlines are, what the objectives are for each stage of the engagement. And I think that that's a piece that can be lacking, and especially when we get busy with our day-to-day. We've been working with people for a very long time, and we expect that they know the rules. So I think it's important, again, to get back to some of those basics every time we start a new project or a new engagement. I think it's really important to get the whole team together. Sometimes that's difficult with time zones. So again, that's one of the other challenges that we've had to accommodate. And during the recruiting process, we have that conversation. So there's an expectation that there might be some changes to workflow when needed to meet some of those meeting times. So we also found that we needed some policies to address downtime when you're working on your personal internet. You could have outages in your area that you don't have any control over. So just getting down to some of the things that you don't necessarily expect in the office area, looking at what are things that could impact productivity at a person's home that we, the organization, don't have control over. It's a good idea to look at that, and downtime was one of those. So with that, I want to make sure that I give enough time for Jason to complete his portion of the presentation. And so I thank you very much for your time, and I will turn it over to Jason. Thank you.
Hey, good morning. This is Jason Coffin. So I want to start by talking about employee engagement because that's important during these times. There's a lot of different information coming out. Some of the different information is government, some's from the state government, some's from the local government, some's from you. And so there's a lot for employees to think about and a lot for employees to worry about and a lot for us personally to worry about, right, as we work through this for a lot of different reasons. So keeping your employees engaged through this, especially as they're working from home, I believe is extremely critical. And I'm going to challenge you because I believe that it all starts with you as a leader. And I want to challenge that everybody on this call is a leader. Everybody's a leader within their organizations, either an official or an unofficial capacity. And your attitude as you approach this, the challenges we're facing and working from home, how you communicate changes and with your staff and how you encourage your staff are really going to make the difference. If you're always having meetings and you're always talking about the bad stuff and you're always worried, you're going to have less engagement from your employees than if you were, talking about what's going on and vetting through the challenges and coming with ideas and encouraging your team. I think that's a better approach as you're trying to get more engagement. But there might be times we're going to hire people through this process, and the hiring changes. And I think that hiring matters more than it ever did before. And you're going to need to look for maybe a different type of person than you had in the past, because bringing somebody in the office and they can sit side by side and they can shadow is a little bit different of a personality than someone that is going to have to self-learn, self-teach, self-manage themselves. And so you need to ask some different questions as you hire people about adaptability and whether or not they're self-starters. I know within HRG, I get asked sometimes from new employees, what does it take to be successful? And I always tell them it's having that entrepreneurial spirit. We're an employee-owned company, and I need people that are going to move forward and not wait to be told. And so I think that probably fits into this new remote workforce environment when you need people that are going to move forward and do and aren't just sitting waiting for someone to reach out to them. And so that's a different way to hire. You can get there by just probing, what kind of leadership styles work for them in the past, asking specific questions, looking for specific results, and asking them what they learned. And I think if you ask those types of questions, you'll be able to identify, can somebody fit in this new world? I think when we come out of this, we'll be different. I think there'll be more people working remote than we've ever had before, just across the United States, because people are finding ways to make this successful, and sometimes they needed this event to push them. So don't stop at the new hire process. Also, I think we need to continue as organizations to foster and hone in on those communication skills. One way you can do that is continue to talk with your teams about your company missions. I know we talk with our teams about company missions, and it's like this. We have some teams that work with critical access hospitals, and we talk about, for some of these facilities, especially now, every dollar matters, right? And every dollar that we can get in for those organizations, help those organizations continue to provide that care in those critical access or those rural communities. And so that's a mission, really. Let's keep healthcare in those rural communities. We also have some clients, Indian health clients, and every dollar we bring into those clients helps them expand their services, right? They can have more behavioral health services, whatever they need. So the mission for those teams is really get the dollars in so these guys, these facilities can expand their services. And then when you're looking at other organizations, a lot of it right now is about patient satisfaction. Patients are nervous. Patients have a lot of questions. And so everything you do is about, let's make this as clean a process as we can for the patients so they don't have to worry, through that process. And let's really have that great service. And so I think if you think about what really is your end result and what are you trying to achieve, talk to your teams about really that mission you have. And I think when they buy into that mission and they have that ownership mentality to the mission, that's really going to get that engagement because they understand what they're doing. And sometimes you feel disconnected to do that. Another thing I think is important is you lose a sense of company sometimes when you're sitting in your office. And I've been working now, I think 60 days out of the office at my house, and you lose a sense of company a little bit. So I think if you have an opportunity to send stuff to your people, send them a pen that says your company on it, or send them a shirt or a coffee cup or something, just something to remind them and put in their workspace and, hey, this is who I work for, and they can see that every day and they see part of that, and little things matter. Find ways to engage them that way. And the other thing you can do is you can continue to build that teamwork with competitions. You can look at competitions. They could be fun competitions like company trivia. We do some based off we're an employee-owned company on just ESOP. What are some things around the ESOP? You could do other competitions like funny pet picture. Everybody send in a funny picture of a pet they have, and let's give a competition there. But some way to bring your teams together in this virtual environment, I think, is extremely important. We have some committees, and maybe you want to copy some of these committees or think about these committees that we use for employee involvement, and we've had to adapt these committees as we've moved forward with working from home. One of them is a CARE committee. It stands for Community Activity, Recreation, Employee Ownership, and really this is the one that does events and builds community with our employees. And so we've had to learn to do more things through email and pictures. We had to do drop ship prizes from Amazon, more collaborative kind of things on the internet. And so that's kind of changed there. We have a health and wellness committee, and they've adapted to let us tell you how to find 10 minutes every day to exercise, and how do you break the boredom up when you're at home, and some of those other things. And we have a veterans to veterans committee where veterans and organization work with other veterans, and really it's how do you support those organizations from afar. We can't go to those locations right now and help those like we used to. We have master builders, which really looks at our proprietary systems and how we utilize those systems better. And that committee is really focused on now working from home. What are things we can do in this new environment? So we're getting a whole different level of ideas there. And then we have an innovation committee, and a lot of stuff coming in there is just how do we mature this? And so when I talk about, I think we're going to come out of this better with a different working model. I think it's because of ideas coming from everybody in the organization on, what about this? What about this? And we just have an opportunity to make this better when historically it hasn't been as high a priority. I want to move to everybody's favorite subject, which is security, which is the next slide. And so security, it's a necessity, right? It costs money. Security people always tell you no, but I think it's more than ever the most important thing we have with this remote environment, and it's because we're so exposed, right? We have company computers sitting on networks in people's houses that isn't necessarily secure like our building. And so really things we got to continue to worry about are the workstations secure? Are we giving routine security updates? Is there ability to do that? And these are questions you can go back and ask if you don't know. What about are the connections secure? And if they're not secure, what can you transmit over that? How do you send PHI back and forth to each other? What's the right way to do that? Another one is just distraction-free workspace. I don't think we have an expectation that everybody working from home has their own office that they can shut their door on. But there should be an expectation that you're protecting PHI, and if you're talking about PHI, it isn't in the middle of the kitchen table so everybody in your family can hear it. So there needs to be some distraction-free area. We need to make sure we're keeping HIPAA very safe. And from a PCI compliance standpoint, when you're talking about patient financial data, that also needs to be secure. And that's an area that sometimes we forget to make secure. We forget about the patient financials. So make sure you're doing good things there. Printing is another one. We don't allow people to print from home just because you can't guarantee the disposal of any PHI, right? At someone's home, you can ask them to shred it. You can ask them to do things. So you need to find a printing solution that you feel comfortable with that helps you be HIPAA compliant. The other one is, I think a lot of folks are using different type of phone solutions out there. And so really, what's your policy on using cell phones? And if you have to call insurance companies, you have to call patients with cell phones. You should just have a policy so everybody's on the same spot on that. And there are going to be interruptions working from home. Working from home is different. And so you should give your staff some scripting. If they're talking to somebody and the dog barks, what are you going to say about that? I'll apologize for that, working from home right now. That's my dog. And, everybody's going to understand right now if you have those things. But if you just are prepared for those types of interruptions, I think it goes a lot smoother. And then the last one is, I think you need to make sure that you can monitor what people are doing, because that's the biggest fear that executive leadership has, is I'm going to let people work from home and I'm going to have a drop in productivity, or people are just going to do nothing. And actually, I think the opposite is happening. A lot of people are really recognizing that they don't have the long commutes, or a lot of different things are happening where people are really stepping up and giving you that extra productivity. But you need to make sure that you can quantify that, and you can you can make sure that you are getting that extra from people or being able to meet those needs. So that's a little bit on security. We'll kind of wrap this up a little bit on what are our final thoughts on this. And our final thoughts are really just from a communication standpoint. I encourage you, and this isn't just for the executive leaders, this isn't just for the supervisors, but employees need to hear from you often. Their coworkers need to hear from you. But if you're a supervisor, you're a leader, they need to hear from you often. And an email is not enough. It's that personal contact. An instant messenger, I would say, is more intimate than an email. An actual phone call to them once in a while. Hey, how are you doing? Let's talk about stuff. It doesn't always have to be work related, but employees want to hear from you. That's important when you're working from home. From a leadership perspective, your attitude, what you do, what you say, how you treat your folks makes the difference right now. Because if they can't see you by example, they don't have that interaction that they've had before. So what you do and what you say, and it really makes the difference through this. From a production standpoint, unfortunately, I think being remote requires more focus on production because of those things I talked about. So really look at, how do you set realistic expectations? How do you talk about those expectations? How do you manage those expectations? And Teresa talked about balanced scorecards and production reports and all these different tools you can use. Those are more important now than ever, in my opinion. And then employee engagement. I mean, you have to keep your employees engaged. Right now, I think everybody is happy that they're still working in the healthcare. There's a lot of work to be out there. But when we come out of this, it's the employees that felt like their companies cared about them, that kept them engaged through the process, I think are the ones that are going to have those loyal employees coming out of here. When we finally have all our quarantine end, and who knows how long this is going to be, right? We're starting to emerge out of some of this, but there could be a round 2 and there could be a round 3. So employee engagement is very critical, and what word of mouth is going to go around. And then security. I think the last thing we want to do is put any of our organizations at risk because we took a shortcut or we didn't think about anything or we didn't have another option. And so I would say continue to focus on security, continue to safeguard your information because it's going to pay off in the end. And don't just be satisfied with the tools you have right now. So that's some final thoughts on the webinar. With that, I'm going to turn it over to Taylor. I appreciate everybody jumping on and listening to Teresa and I today. Thank you.
Thanks, Jason and Teresa. Great job and great information. So as I mentioned last week, we have something new and exciting for you all. HRG will be interviewing industry leaders in our new podcast, The Revenue Cycle Review. Episode 2 will be posted next Tuesday on our website and available on Apple and Google podcast platforms. Be sure to subscribe to make sure you don't miss an episode. As usual, we will be sharing the webinar recording and slides in an email later today, as long as GoToWebinar doesn't have a little fit like it did last week and then delay that for you guys. Included in that email is a link to a survey. We would so appreciate you letting us know your thoughts. As we start to put together our next webinar series, we'd really like to know what you guys want to hear from us and any information that you're looking for or you feel you're missing. Additionally, you can request a certificate of attendance in that survey. And also when you're done with that survey, you'll be entered to win a $25 Amazon gift card. Thank you all for joining us. As I mentioned at the beginning of this presentation, we are going to be taking a 2-week break and be back with you guys with more exciting content in June. So we look forward to seeing you then and enjoy your Memorial Day weekend. Have a great rest of your day.